you are ready to create an environment based in trust, respect, and openness among your teens. And by a show of hands, how many of you are excited to learn 2 key skill sets today that will support you in being able to effectively communicate in any situation, personal or professional? Right. Well, I want to welcome all of you to Mastering Effective Communication Practices of Exceptional Leaders. I want to acknowledge you for being here. I know we are on a holiday week, and probably you are, I would guess you're in the mindset of excited to go spend time with your families and loved ones and be in the holiday spirit. So I really want to appreciate you for being here. It says a lot about your commitment to the kind of work environment where people can thrive, that you would choose to spend your time here today out of all the things you could be doing. So I really want to thank you all for coming. Linda Marie told you a little bit about my experience. I want to take a moment and tell you about why I do what I do. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
I realized early in my career that I was spending 8 to 10 hours, sometimes even more, at work with my colleagues. I also realized at a very early point in my career that I was really interested in being connected, feeling a sense of belonging, feeling like what I had to provide and contribute would make an impact. And I started doing some research and realized that we actually are, in the words of Brene Brown, I don't know if you know who she is, but Brene Brown, scientist and sociologist, psychologist, has done some research that says we really are hardwired, so to speak, to be connected. We long for that. We long to belong. So that was my inspiration to start on this path of this work. About a year ago, my at-stakeness for this work increased dramatically. So October 2018, my father, who I absolutely adored, passed away very unexpectedly, very suddenly. And at the time of his passing, he had kind of moved up through the ranks in a company called DaVita Healthcare. He was a senior administrator. During his final days, we had people streaming into the hospital from his work as well as his community, his volunteer work in the community. And they were saying things to us like, Bill Hyland made me a better husband. Your dad made me a better wife. Your dad helped me to be a better father to my 3 children. Then we got a call from the CEO of DaVita Healthcare. We put him on speakerphone in the hospital the evening before my dad passed. This is the CEO of a 70,000 employee global workforce, global company. And the CEO said to my dad a lot of things thanking him for his contribution. My dad created a lot of innovations for the company. And then he paused, he choked up, and he said, but most importantly, thank you for teaching me how to be a better human being. Thank you for teaching me how to love and how to care and how to see all the people that I interact with every day. So that's why I'm here. I am about and passionate about people being seen and valued for their contribution. And we all know in this political climate that we're all in that changes are happening all the time. Yes? Yes, all the time. And there's a lot of uncertainty. I say that what is certain is who we are for each other. And I say that who we are for each other lives inside of those skills and practices that we take on every day on a regular basis. So we're going to learn a couple skill sets today, but it is grounded in a much bigger picture, a much bigger context of who are we for each other. I'm going to say a couple more things about today, and then we're going to dive in. How does that sound? This is going to be interactive. I have some things to share with you. Some of it, maybe all of it, you may have heard before. We're going to put it in a different context, hopefully, for you. What will have this live today is your willingness and get to bring to the table what's real for you inside what we're doing today. So participate, stop me. Hey, Dawnelle, wait a minute. That doesn't ring for me. Hold on. Hold up. It's okay to interrupt. I'm going to ask you at different times to share. So I'm inviting you to participate 100%. That's what's going to have our time together be the most valuable. And I actually have some requests for us in this time that we have. My requests are that we participate 100%. What that means is that you're here, you are engaging when there's an opportunity to share, you're doing that. If you have a question, you're doing that. Is there anybody not okay with participating 100%? It'd be a little intimidating to say so right now, wouldn't it? Are we all good with that? Give me a thumbs up if you're okay with that. Great. Okay, be present. So again, be here, you know, phones on vibrate. Obviously emergencies come up, I understand that. Especially this is, you know, an hour of time that we're spending together, something may happen. But if you would keep your phones on vibrate, is that good with everybody? Everybody okay with that? Okay, great. And then finally, use I statements. Why do you think that would be one of our pieces that will allow our work together to be valuable for everybody? What's the value of using I statements versus he, she, they?
It's personal.
Say,
it's personal.
It's personal, and what's the value of that for any of you to make it personal? Or
this is the type of thing where if you're talking to somebody, you may disagree with them, and so you're not attacking them, I guess, by using an I statement. It's that kind of thing. Not even if you don't mean to attack them, but you know, if you're saying I, you know, the way it affects me is not I'm coming out and saying, you know, like you're wrong, or you know, like what you believe is incorrect or something.
yeah, absolutely. So it's a way of owning the communication. It's owning that this is my perspective, and my perspective is not everybody's perspective, right? But it's valuable in that it's mine. So, yeah, use I statements. Is everybody okay with that? Mm-hmm. All right. Great. Well, I am excited about the time that we have. We're going to move. I've just done some work with you up front to set the stage, but we're going to move quickly. Are you good with that? Because I literally have probably a week worth of things that I could share with you, and I pulled a couple out that I think you will be the most useful for you right now, most immediately applicable. So I'm going to start by asking all of you, when you hear the word context, what does that bring to mind for you? What's a context? Backstory?
Yeah, relationship, the connecting of dots.
Connecting of dots. Okay.
Details.
What else?
Details.
Details. Okay. Say a little bit more about that, Kimberly.
Well, when you're taking something in context, like how did you interpret those details of what the person was saying?
Yeah. How did you interpret those details of what the person was saying? So your interpretation, then, would you say your interpretation is the context?
Yes.
Okay. So an interpretation that we put on details.
Yes.
Okay. Other thoughts? What's context?
Environment, what's happening around, what's going on, what you're talking about.
Okay, the environment. Environment, what's happening. Yeah, let's weave together a few of what you all said. So you said environment. And let's just, let's call this right here an environment. How's that? Let's call this an environment, a particular space in which something happens. Kimberly, you said the context is the interpretation you bring to details, yes?
Well, it's the interpretation of what you got from the details, like what you interpreted to mean.
What you interpreted to mean.
Yes.
So let's say that could we say that our interpretation on whatever shows up in front of us provides a context? Could we say that? So, for instance, can we on any given day turn on the news and bring an interpretation on what we see?
Based on what we hear, and then we hear something else and it changes, it may change your interpretation.
It may change your interpretation. Yeah, so one thing we can say about context is that we're always having the opportunity to choose it. Could we say that?
As you get more information,
As
gonna
you get more
change.
information. Yeah,
or
it's
it
more-
can change.
it can change. Yeah. So how we see what shows up in front of us provides the context. Can we say that? In our interactions with our team members, could we say that as leaders, at whatever position we're in FHI 360, we ourselves are a context for what goes on in our environment? It's a big conversation. Could we say that? Yeah. Can anybody think of a time where you chose a particular context for or way that you were going to impact your team that then demonstrated itself in results? Yeah, Linda Marie?
Well, my come from is my team is magnificent and brilliant, and that's the context I set, and then they show up that way.
Okay.
I know they already are, but I make up it's because I set the context, and that's who they are.
Yeah. So let's take that as an example. So you have a context, Linda Marie, that your team members are brilliant and magnificent. So inside the context of brilliant let's say magnificent, what are some of the things that actually show up? Because context has certain things show up. So for example, in the context of a desert, what are you going to have show up in that environment?
Sand.
Sand. What else are you going to see in that environment?
Heat.
Heat or feel.
Cactus,
Cactus. Maybe a water hole if you're really lucky every once in a while.
armadillos.
Armadillos. So inside the environment called desert, there are certain things that show up. Yes? Now, what would happen if we tried to plant a lush fern or some other kind of lush plant in the desert?
They put a lot of work on it.
Not the right environment.
It's not the right environment. It wouldn't work. It would probably die. Yes? It would die. So inside of Linda Marie's context of brilliant and magnificent, what are some of the things that you would imagine would show up in her team?
Attention to detail.
Attention to detail, okay. We'll shorten that. What else might show up?
Confidence,
Confidence,
Creativity.
creativity, what else?
Ownership.
Ownership. Say more about ownership. What does that mean to you?
that, you know, if something comes up, you're able to just run with it. You know, I don't mean it's easy, but it's yours. You know, you're not looking to find someone else who can handle that. You're gonna finish it. You're gonna carry it out.
So I'm gonna finish it, it's mine, I have a stake in it. Got it. Anything else that might show up in here, anything else you've seen, Linda Marie, that's shown up inside of that?
Independence, being able to work independently,
Okay, independence.
undying loyalty.
And die.
Right, Kimberly?
Are you in her team? Okay. Does all of this ring true for you?
It really does.
Putting her on the spot.
I'll take it, all of it.
Okay, undying loyalty.
Okay.
All right, got it.
Maybe not dying, but loyalty.
Like the Liz.
They'll go the extra mile, because they get that,
Extra mile,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
they get that they matter, and least on and on.
Now, let's say that you had a manager, I'm sure nobody in here fits what I'm about to describe. But maybe you can harken back to an experience you may have had with someone like this. What if the context was, oh my gosh, people cannot perform well, everything has to fall on me all the time? What if that was the context, the interpretation that a manager brought to a team? What kinds of things might we see inside of that context?
The opposite to most of that.
The opposite. Yeah, let's put some words on what we may see.
Fear.
Fear,
Anxiousness.
anxiousness,
Ineptitude.
ineptitude,
Inadequate,
inadequate,
unhappy.
unhappy.
Doing the bare minimum versus extra mile.
Yeah, during the bare minimum
Yeah.
versus, yeah, bare minimum. What can I do to get by because I'm afraid to risk, because if I do and I get it wrong, they're gonna come down on me. Yeah.
Disengaged.
Disengaged, my body is here, I'm doing some things, but I'm not really present. My full passion is not here. Yeah, so as leaders, and again, leaders at any level, regardless of your role here, I'm asserting that you have tremendous power, more than you think, to shape what happens in the people that you work with, based on the context that you bring to it. And I could point to a lot of research that proves this to be true. Research in psychology, research in team performance, high team performance, that points to whatever each team member, not just the manager, not just the one in the role, but whatever each team member brings to the team as a conscious choice has tremendous impact on what is able to happen with that team. So just let that sink in for a moment, and I'm going to give you a moment to jot down. You could jot it on the back of your packet if you'd like, or if you brought some paper with you. Jot down for a moment, what is the context that you're committed to bringing to your team? Chosen context.
Can my team be my family at Thanksgiving? How I'm seeing them?
Yes, your team can be your family. It could be your work team. It could be if you volunteer in the community, if you're participating in your church. You could do all of that, because team is also a context in and of itself. If I come to my family with the approach that we're a team here, we're going to have a very different experience than if I come to my family with the approach of we're all separate individuals, independent. So what is the context that you're committed to bringing to your work team or your family team?
context that we want to bring or that we bring?
If what you currently bring is not what you want to bring, then address it from the standpoint of what you want to bring.
Okay.
Yeah, in this moment, make a choice. Even if, you know what, even if it has been what you've been bringing, in this moment, consciously choose it. Does that make sense? Your name?
Alyssa.
Alyssa. Okay, thank you for that, Alyssa. Give you another minute or so. Okay, take a few more seconds. And go ahead and bring that to a close wherever you are right now. This is something you can keep going back to as a practice, a regular practice. What is the context I'm committed to bringing and being? Let's take some sharing. Who would like to share with us what you wrote?
I'll go ahead and share. So it's I immediately wrote an ear because it's been a frustrating time for a lot of people recently, especially, I won't go into the details too much here, but there's just a lot of people who are either frustrated with the way things have been going, or they feel like they're not being listened to by different not directors, but management, I'll say. And so at the very least, I want to provide them an ear to get some of those frustrations out. Maybe they just need to vent for a bit, maybe they just need to, bounce some ideas off, or they have an idea and they're not sure how to take it further. And so that was the first thing I wrote. Kind of feeding off of that, the next thing I wrote was solution-oriented. There's a lot of problems, a lot of frustrating, issues. And it's like, rather than focusing on how big the problems are, let's focus on how to actually do something about them when we can. I kind of had the same question as you, as about, do we want to write what we want to be or what we have been? And so I wrote optimism. I try to be optimistic, but I fall into the same trap. And so I want to be optimistic, especially for others, and for myself. And so optimism, and then idea creation and the confidence to try those ideas. You can be frustrated, you can be trying to do a lot of work and you can be great at it and maybe you're getting a lot of accolades, but if you come up with an idea and it's not heard or it's not followed through on, that can really just put a damper on the whole thing. Or vice versa, maybe you're not engaged with what you're doing. You come up with an idea, it is heard, it is implemented, and you feel like, oh, we talked about responsibility, ownership, and engagement. If you can get an idea out there that's actually enacted upon, then, you feel like you have a stake in it, and you're much more, I feel like people are much more likely to actually try. So.
I'm listening to what you're sharing, and the word that keeps coming to me is being a champion for people. Does that ring for you?
Yes.
It just came to me. What did you say? But you really being optimistic, being an ear, being somebody that they can come to and run things by and work through things, being the kind of person who really encourages others to take risks with new ideas. That's great. Thank you, Matt. Let's actually give him a hand. We're clapping not as a yes, I agree, but we're clapping as a form of acknowledgement because it's a risk to share in a group. So thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Who else would like to share?
Mine's a much shorter.
Yeah.
Just helpfulness and empathy. So I do a lot of support in computer programming of trying to analyze data, and people need help in understanding that data, or or there's a big project that needs to be done, and I just want to be able to help get it done well and understand that they're in a rush and they need that stuff, and working together with other people on projects is, you know, something that brings us together would be empathy, understanding.
Great, so empathy, understanding, being the kind of person who has other people realize she really gets me. She knows what I need. She knows my timeline, and she's here to help me. She's here to help me to move forward with whatever I need. She cares. Yeah, great. Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, so whatever you wrote on your sheet, I want you to think about that as we move into learning 2 related skill sets and the practices that go with them. And I say that because skills alone don't always do the job. Has anybody ever noticed that? That skills alone don't always get it done? It might get it done, but not as efficiently and effectively as it could get done if you have a context of helpfulness, encouragement, magnificence, and brilliance, a context where you're inviting people to take ownership. Inside of that kind of environment, the skills we're about to learn will really support you in soaring with your teams. Make sense to everyone? So we're going to talk about 2 related skill sets. Both of them are within a whole body of work that has literally been developed for over 7 decades, called Conversations for Effective Action. We're going to learn 2 of these conversations today, and they are very interwoven. So a conversation for effective action is a conversation that is deliberate. It is thought through. And the reality is that you and I are having conversations for effective action all day long, all the time, which you'll see in a moment as we go through this. But we're not always deliberate about it because of all kinds of things. Lots on our mind, so much going on. But if we can be deliberate about these conversations, the research shows that action will be effective, it will be efficient, and people will feel like they're thriving, even, and maybe even especially, in times of deep uncertainty, which we're all going through right now. The first conversation is requesting. So how many of you know that you make requests all the time, every day, probably tens, maybe even hundreds of times a day? How many of you are aware of that? What this conversation says is that for a request to be a genuine request, you need to have these elements. And these are in your packet. So you can refer to those on if you flip it to the first page. One is a committed speaker. Okay, this would be the person who's actually making the request. Now, what do you think it means by committed speaker? How is that distinct from just anybody making a request? Any thoughts?
Well, the bullet points down below about openness, being open to a counter offer or a no, and how you will behave if those are put as an answer.
Yeah. So absolutely, being open for an actual response. Being open to a response is part of being a committed speaker. So many times what I've found, and I've done it until I started learning this work, I would make a request, but it was wasn't really a genuine request, because it was I want you to do this, go do it. I wasn't checking in, I wasn't clear about, was the person in front of me even clear on what the request was. I didn't give them room to respond. So committed speaker, there's an openness with that. There's also a being really present to exactly what is needed. And that's an important part of being a committed speaker. So if I'm making a request of you, I'm not just saying something like, hey, will you get me that data sometime next week? I'm saying I would like to have, and I put parameters on it, X data by 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Are you able to get that to me by then? So committed speaker is what is needed for the request to be fulfilled is very clear. Okay? Also, a committed listener is necessary. So, committed listener is somebody who is present, somebody who has the competency and capability to perform the request, to provide what's needed. Present. Not, oh, let's see, Clay's on the phone, let me ask him something while he's on the phone and I hope he gets it, right? It's, let me take a moment when I'm eyeball to eyeball. Kimberly, I have a request of you. Do you have a moment? I do. And then proceeded like that. So ensuring that there's a committed listener. Committed listeners are also at the highest level of performance in ownership already. So they have a manager who's decided that their team is brilliant and magnificent, or is about helping or caring or encouraging or being empathetic. So they know that they, it's okay to be creative and take risks. So they're coming into the interaction already committed and in ownership because that kind of context has been set already. Does that make sense? So they're committed, they're at stake, they're present. And then you have terms of fulfillment, exactly what's needed. This is so simple that it can be taken for granted. I just did a longer communication training and team development work with a national organization, Sierra Club. And in the work that we did, what the team started to realize is that they hadn't been clear on the terms of fulfillment. They were assuming that the other person, when they were making the request, knew what they were requesting. So one example was a campaign manager for the Sierra Club asked somebody in media for a plan by 5 p.m. on Monday. The person said yes. Well, their idea of a plan was a paragraph about the overall direction. What the campaign manager wanted was a detailed list of milestones and timelines. So the clarity wasn't there. So it's important to have clear terms of fulfillment. And then you need to, of course, including in that as a by-when. And so by-when. And finally, a real opportunity for a real response. Let's talk about that. If we want to create a context in which employees are engaged, employees are creative, employees are in ownership and take risk, we've got to, when we're making requests of them, give them the option of having dialogue with us around it. So if I say to a coworker, can you get this to me by this data plan with milestones to me by 5 p.m. on Friday, there's got to be room for them to say, yes, I can. I'll take care of it, no problem. There's also got to be an opportunity for a counter offer. You know what, my plate is really, really full this week. is it possible that I could get this piece to you by 5 p.m. on Friday and get the rest of it to you by next Tuesday? And then there's a dialogue entered into of request, counteroffer, request, counteroffer, request, counteroffer on both parties until something is reached that will be mutually supportive. Is this making sense? Does anybody have a hard time with this one? With giving the space for counteroffer?
I do. When I'm dealing with my adult children.
Okay.
I don't want a counter offer.
Uh-huh.
I want, yes, I'll do that. That's what I expect when I'm giving a request.
Okay.
I mean, there's room for a counter offer now that they're both adults, but
Yeah.
I don't want one.
I understand. What would become possible in your relationship with them if you allowed for that? And what would become possible for them as well as?
Well, trust and them feeling like they matter and that what they're feeling matters. So, and then my ability to trust what they can do and what they will do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't like it, but yes, there's always a room for a counteroffer.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and you get to weigh that for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, is it more important to me to really help them learn to trust themselves and think for themselves, or is it more important for me to like what they say?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I understand you don't like it, and I appreciate your courage in saying that. But there is I think of it like maybe short term, not like long term,
Yeah.
full
It's
development.
better, yes. in the long term.
Yeah. Anybody else have a problem with this counter-offer idea? Yes.
Well, when she said it too, it resonated because she didn't say, make a request, she said, give a request. And like I would give my son lots of requests. And none of them had a sincere opportunity for a response. I pretended like there was, but it wasn't sincere. And something else that stands out to me in this is that it all goes back to context, because the committed listener is developed through context. And without the context, do you really have a committed listener, even if they're acting like a committed listener? You have to develop context to get a committed listener, and it's key to this whole process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Committed listeners, we could go back to our context environment square here and put committed listeners in there, committed speakers in there. Absolutely, absolutely. So making a request is different than issuing a demand. Disguised in nice clothes as a request, right?
To Linda Marie's point, so we would, oh God, it's gone. We would change the way we viewed it, the request.
The person making the request, the instead of giving
The way the person, yes, making the request viewed the possible response, possible comeback, possible.
Yeah.
We would
'Cause
change the way we look at it.
Yeah, don't pretend it's a request when you're giving it to them. That's a demand. That's a,
Yeah, I confuse my children all the time, asking them, you know, hey, would you like to go ahead? And there's no, get on that right now.
Right,
And
we do that all the
I
time.
because I'm asking them a question and there is no question.
okay,
Yeah.
okay is not an answer, is good
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
So if
Now-
you're going to make a request,
Yes.
really make it and be willing to have.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. Tell me your name?
Kathleen.
Kathleen, what you just shared with us about changing, as the speaker, the one making the request, changing the way that we see what comes back to us. That's vital, actually, because if somebody, let's say here at work, if I made a request of you and you came back and said, I really just can't do that, rather than me taking it as, oh, they're being defiant, or, oh, they're being lazy, or any of those kinds of things where we might go internally, I could hear it as, wow, they really want to do well by the team, and they're having the courage to speak up and say what they can't do. Now I have somewhere I can go with this. Now I can negotiate with them to find out what can happen and be resourceful to pull in other resources that I need to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Does that make sense to all of you? That's a very different dynamic than what I often see in environments that are more kind of top-down or the command control kind of environments. Those are harsh words, but yeah.
Well, our team talks about assume positive intent, and a lot of the times when we hear that, it has to do with interpersonal interactions, but also, you know, when you get siloed in your work, you can feel very like, oh, you know, you just don't understand. And if you come from that point of assume positive intent, then that can change the framework of how you're receiving a request or how you're receiving, not pushback, but a different idea or a change of some kind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Assuming that everybody wants the best, everybody is here to have all of us thrive. That's vital. That goes back to context. Yeah. So having the opportunity for a counter offer or a no or a yes is important here. Now, here's the great thing. If they say no, then it's an opportunity for you to make another request. And what might need to happen is you simply might need to tell them how urgent it is and why. They may not have any sense of that. I've done that many times where I've requested something of someone and they've said, I really can't get it done. And then I've come back and said, you know what? This is really urgent. It needs, you know, I need it by this time frame for this reason. So I've given them the purpose and then ask, can you help me figure it out? If you really can't do it, can you brainstorm with me so we can figure out how this can get done? Does that make sense? Okay. So let me ask you, what are some kinds, general category kinds of requests that you make at work? Or you could say in your family also. What kinds of requests? General categories. I mentioned one earlier, requesting a plan. What other kinds of requests?
Come visit your mother,
Come visit your mother.
your vegan mother on Thanksgiving Day.
Come visit your vegan mother on Thanksgiving Day.
I gotta know, by the way.
Okay.
More information.
Okay, more information. Any other kinds of requests you're making every day?
Can
How
you do
do
a
I-
task? Do this thing for
Do
me?
this task, yep, tasks. Yeah, we could go on and on. So just let your mind bubble up and think about what kinds of requests you make every day or get requested by someone to provide. Let's talk about a promise. So every element that was present in a request is also element in a promise. So if you are the promisor, you're the committed speaker. That means it's incumbent on you to be clear about exactly what is being asked of you. So you are 100% in ownership by being very clear about what's being asked of you. If somebody says to you, hey, can you get me this next week, this plan next week? If somebody asked me that, I would be, as a committed speaker, I would be asking, what do you think I'd be asking them? If somebody said, can you get me this plan next week, Dawnelle? As a committed promiser, committed speaker, what might I ask them?
What time, what day?
What plan?
What time, what day, what plan?
How much time should it take?
How much time should it take me to do
Much
it?
detail.
How much detail do you want? Exactly what do you want in the plan? Yes, so as a committed speaker, as the one making the promise, it's as important that you ask for what you need as it is for the requester to ask for what they need.
I have to do that a lot because a lot of people ask me for a lot of data, and sometimes what they're asking for, they don't really realize what they're asking for, and so I have to kind of say, okay, what do you plan to use this information for, so that I can not only give them what they think they need, but give them what they don't know they need.
Yes, absolutely.
I have to do that a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Find out, what is it for? Yeah.
Giving people what they don't know they need is where people often miss each other, because they don't communicate enough about what it is they're asking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that goes to committed listener. The one who is making the request inside the promise is listening for what the person needs in order to fulfill on the promise. So you need to have both, again, in terms of fulfillment, a buy-win, and a response. This works the best when both parties are 100% in ownership. Okay? So we're going to do a quick activity right now. Are you excited? Let's see how many of you are there.
There's, and you're 5 guys.
Okay, so we're going to do an activity, it's a partner activity. And the way it works is you're going to, in a moment, you're going to take your chair and go sit across from someone, keeping your body, open body, you know, not like this or like, because I'm nervous because I'm in front of another human being, but open body, because we communicate non-verbally as well, and being open communicates openness. You'll sit in front of the person, and once you're in your partner, I'll tell you what to do. This is a short exercise. So go ahead, spread out, find a partner quickly. Take your chairs, be in front of them quickly, and I'll tell you what to do from there. All right, so we're going to choose a partner A and a partner B. Go ahead and choose an A and a B. Okay, partner A's, raise your hands. Okay, partner A, you're going to go first. What you're going to do is you're going to simply make a request of partner B. Okay, just make a request of partner B. So take us 10 seconds, think of what you want to ask them. And partner B, as the one promising, you're going to ask anything you need to ask to be clear about it, and then tell them yes. Okay, now this is a trial of this. You're not really asking them to do whatever. You know, if they ask you to jump off skydiving today, practice saying yes, because you're not really going to do that. Okay? So partner A, you're going to make a request. Partner B, ask whatever you need to get it clear, and then tell them yes. You have a minute.
Well, you don't have to do it.
Oh.
Give the last 10 inches that were sent on the FHI clinical sonography.
Can you organize a backcountry for us next week?
So we're going to review them and prepare for the scenario.